Tonight, we pull back the curtain on a story that rocked the elite world of New York fashion. It's a world of blinding lights, billion-dollar deals, and secrets buried deeper than bedrock. We'll take you inside the most anticipated show of the year, where tech billionaire Damian Sterling sat front row, his stunning model Mistress on his arm, the picture of power and conquest. He believed he was the king of his universe, the master of every room he entered. But he was about to learn that in a world built on illusion, the most devastating truths are revealed when the spotlight is at its brightest. What happened next wasn't just a scandal, it was a reckoning. The air in the Chelsea warehouse was electric thick with the scent of expensive perfume hairspray and the metallic tang of ambition. It was the final night of New York Fashion Week, and the hottest ticket wasn't for a legacy brand like Gucci or Chanel. It was for Aura, the 3-year-old atelier that had exploded onto the scene with its ethereal designs, architectural precision, and an almost supernatural understanding of the female form. At the center of this blazing star was Damian Sterling, the tech mogul whose Midas touch had seemingly blessed the brand. He arrived as he always did, like a conquering hero. The flashbulbs of the paparazzi erupted in a violent, strobing frenzy as he stepped out of his black Rolls-Royce Cullinan. Damian, with his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite, and a smile that could disarm senators, played his part to perfection. He offered a few choice quotes to the reporters from Vogue and WWD, and then, with a practiced gesture, turned to help his companion from the car. Selena Rossi emerged like a butterfly from a chrysalis, a 24-year-old model and influencer whose star was hitched firmly to Damian's wagon. She was breathtaking in a crimson silk dress that clung to her every curve, a custom Aura piece, of course. Her long, dark hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her smile was a dazzling mix of coyness and triumph. She looped her arm through Damian's, pressing herself against him. To the world, they were the ultimate power couple, new money and new beauty, intoxicating and unapologetic. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Celine whispered, her voice a husky purr as they navigated the scrum. "It's just business, darling," Damian replied, though the smug curl of his lips betrayed his satisfaction. He loved this, the adoration, the envy, the power. He had built an empire from code and algorithms, but it was the tangible, glamorous world of fashion that truly fed his ego. Inside, they were escorted to their throne-like seats in the front row. Anna Wintour was a few seats down, her signature bob and sunglasses an immovable fixture of fashion royalty. A-list actors, musicians, and old-money socialites filled the coveted spaces. Damian nodded at a few, shook a hand here and there, the benevolent king surveying his court. Celine sat beside him, preening under the ambient light, taking a subtle selfie for her 10 million followers, captioning it, "My King's Big Night." Aura, NYFW. Damian felt a vibration in his pocket. He pulled out his phone. A single text message from a number saved as home. "Break a leg tonight. I know the collection is going to be spectacular." "See." He scowled, a flicker of irritation crossing his face before he smoothed it away. "Catherine, his wife." He typed a quick, dismissive reply. "Thanks, feeling good about it." He didn't ask how she was. He didn't mention the baby. Their baby. The one he hadn't wanted, but had begrudgingly accepted. He pocketed the phone, the thought of Catherine a dull ache in the back of his mind. She was at their cavernous penthouse on Park Avenue, probably nesting, sketching, or doing whatever pregnant women did. He had told her the stress of the show would be too much for her in her condition. It was a lie, of course, a convenient excuse. Her presence would complicate things. It would ruin the perfect, curated image he was presenting to the world with Celine. His mind drifted back 5 years to a crowded art gallery in Soho. He was a rising tech star, then rich but still considered a nerdy outsider by the city's elite. And then he saw her. Catherine Hayes. She wasn't a model or an heiress. She was a design student from Parsons, standing in front of a Rothko, her brow furrowed in concentration. She had a sketchbook in her hand and a smudge of charcoal on her cheek. She was real, grounded, brilliant. He'd been instantly captivated. Their courtship was a whirlwind. He was fascinated by her mind, her raw talent. She could look at a building, a flower, a shadow, and see a dress in it. She dreamt in textiles and silhouettes. He had the capital and the business acumen. She had the vision. "We could build something," he'd told her one night, sitting on the floor of her tiny apartment, surrounded by her sketches. "Something the world has never seen. Your art, my strategy. Together." That was how Aura was born. In the beginning, it was their shared dream. They worked side by side, 20-hour days, fueled by coffee and passion. She was the creative soul, designing every piece, sourcing every fabric, weeping with joy when the first sample was perfect. He was the engine securing funding, building the e-commerce platform, crafting the marketing narrative. The narrative, that was where it began to sour. Damien Sterling, the tech genius who conquered fashion. The headlines read, "Sterling's Aura." His name became the brand. Her name, Catherine Hayes, and later Catherine Sterling, faded into the background. "It's better for the brand, Cat," he'd argued, his voice smooth and reasonable. "The story of a tech billionaire disrupting a traditional industry is powerful. It's clean, a husband and wife team. It sounds small, like an Etsy shop." She was hurt, but she trusted him. She hated the spotlight anyway. As long as she could create, she was happy. So she became the ghost in the machine, the silent partner, the secret co-founder. Only a handful of people knew the truth, their core staff and their head designer, Matteo Ricci, a prodigy Catherine had discovered and mentored, a man who worshipped the ground she walked on. Then came the pregnancy. It was unplanned. Catherine was overjoyed. Damien saw it as a complication, a distraction from the global expansion plans for Aura. Around the same time, Celine Rossi had slid into his DMs. She was everything Catherine wasn't. Flashy easy, demanding nothing but attention and luxury, things he had in abundance. The affair was an escape, a thrill that stroked his ego in a way his quiet, brilliant wife no longer did. Now sitting in the front row, Celine's hand possessively on his thigh, he felt a pang of something not quite guilt, but a low-grade annoyance. Catherine's text was a reminder of the messy reality he had to go home to. But that was for later. Tonight was about him, about his triumph. The lights in the warehouse dimmed. A single powerful beam of light hit the start of the runway. The bass of the music began to throb, a deep, primal heartbeat that vibrated through the floor. The show was starting. Damien Sterling leaned back, a confident smirk on his face, completely unaware that his meticulously constructed world was about to be torn apart, thread by thread. The first model stepped onto the runway, and a collective hush fell over the audience. The collection was titled Metamorphosis, a name Damien had personally approved, thinking it reflected the brand's rapid evolution in the market. He had no idea of the irony. The designs were a departure from Aura's previous work. While the brand's DNA, the clean lines, the unexpected draping was present, There was a new softness, a new strength. Gowns of liquid silver organza floated down the catwalk, their structure held by what looked like delicate, shimmering veins. Jackets were tailored with the precision of armor, but cut from blush-pink tweed, softening their severity. There were recurring motifs of budding flowers and wings, not in a literal garish way, but subtly woven into the fabrics or suggested in the cut of a sleeve. It was breathtaking. Damien swelled with pride. He accepted the admiring glances from those around him with a magnanimous dip of his head. He was a genius. Look what he had created. He squeezed Celine's hand, pulling her a little closer. "It's divine, darling." She breathed, her eyes wide with genuine awe. "You've outdone yourself." He just smiled, letting her believe it. In his mind, he had. He funded it. He marketed it. He was the face of it. What more was there? The actual tedious work of sketching and sewing. That was for the little people, for employees. He hadn't looked at one of Catherine's sketchbooks in over a year. He just approved the final digital renderings Matteo's team sent over. As the show progressed, a subtle narrative began to emerge. The first looks were restrictive, almost like beautiful cages. Models wore corsets of polished steel over silk, their movements slightly constrained. Then the designs began to open up. The steel softened into silver embroidery. The silhouettes loosened, flowing with a newfound freedom. It was the story of a breaking free. The finale piece was the showstopper. The model wore a gown that seemed spun from moonlight itself. It was a cascade of iridescent fabric, intricately beaded to resemble the scales of a mythical creature. But as she turned at the end of the runway, the back of the dress was revealed to be a magnificent pair of wings, not attached but integrated into the very fabric of the gown, unfurling with her every movement. It was a masterpiece of defiance and liberation. The audience erupted. The applause was deafening, a roar of approval that shook the building. People were on their feet. Anna Wintour herself was clapping, a rare, genuine smile on her face. Damien stood up, basking in the glory, his arms open, as if to embrace the adoration personally. This was his moment. The models completed their final walk, and then, as was tradition, the creative director was to take his bow. The music swelled. Matteo Ricci stepped out from backstage. He was a young man, only in his late 20s, with the fiery passion of a true artist. He had dark, intense eyes and a nervous energy. He walked to the center of the runway, the applause washing over him. He looked overwhelmed, emotional. Damien clapped loudest of all, a proud, proprietary smile fixed on his face. Matteo was his man, his head designer. Matteo raised a hand, and the crowd quieted slightly, expecting a simple wave and a bow. But he walked over to the DJ booth and took a microphone. This was unscheduled. Damien's smile faltered slightly. "What was this thank you?" Matteo began, his voice shaking but clear, amplified throughout the vast space. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight, to see this collection, to see it come to life. It's the greatest honor of my career." He paused, taking a deep breath and looking directly at the front row. His eyes didn't land on Damien. They swept right past him. "For 3 years," Matteo continued, his voice gaining strength, "I have had the privilege of being the head designer at Ayura. I have been the hands that have helped shape the clay. But I have never been the artist. I have been the translator, not the author. The headlines, the articles, they've told a simple, clean story. But the truth, like all beautiful things, is far more complex." A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Damien's face had gone rigid. His hand, still holding Selina's, tightened into a fist. What the hell was Matteo doing? This was not the plan. This was career suicide. The story of Aura is not about one man's business genius. Matteo said, his voice ringing with conviction. It is about one woman's soul. Every design you have seen for the past 3 years, and especially every piece in the Metamorphosis collection tonight, came from the mind, the heart, and the hands of one person. A person who has been content to work in the shadows, to let others take the credit, because her only true passion is the art itself. Damien felt the blood drain from his face. The heat of 100 spotlights seemed to be converging on him, suffocating him. He could feel Celine stiffen beside him, her confusion turning to dawning horror. The name Aura was chosen because it represents the unseen energy that surrounds a person. Matteo's voice boomed. And it is time for the world to meet the true aura of this brand. She is my mentor, my inspiration, and my dearest friend. It is my profound honor to introduce to you the co-founder and creative visionary of Aura. Damien was already on his feet, a strangled Matteo forming on his lips. But it was too late. Matteo turned towards the backstage entrance and extended his hand. Catherine Sterling. Time seemed to slow down. The side entrance to the runway opened, and from the darkness, Catherine emerged into the light. She was 7 months pregnant, her baby bump a proud, beautiful curve under a simple, elegant black gown of her own design. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back. Her face was luminous, and her blue eyes, clear and steady, held no fear. She looked directly at Damien, a flicker of old pain in her gaze, but it was overshadowed by a powerful, quiet resolve. A collective gasp went through the audience, a sound like the wind being knocked out of 1,000 lungs. The photographers, recovering from their shock, went into a frenzy. The sound of their shutters was like machine gun fire, a frantic, desperate volley aimed at the 3 figures at the center of the world's most shocking drama. Damien stood frozen, a statue of disbelief and rage. Beside him, Selina Rossi looked like she had seen a ghost. Her perfectly made-up face was a mask of utter humiliation, the crimson of her dress suddenly looking cheap and gaudy next to the simple elegance of the pregnant wife. The caption on her Instagram post, "My King's Big Night," was now a monument to her own public folly. Catherine walked gracefully towards the center of the stage, her hand resting gently on her belly. She took Matteo's outstretched hand, and they stood together, facing the stunned crowd. She did not look at her husband again. She didn't need to. In that one silent, powerful act, she had not just reclaimed her work. She had reclaimed her life. The metamorphosis was complete. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then thunderous. It was no longer just for the clothes. It was for the sheer, unadulterated drama. It was for the woman who had just checkmated her billionaire husband in front of the entire fashion world. Backstage was chaos. As soon as Catherine and Matteo stepped behind the curtain, they were swarmed by their team seamstresses, interns, assistants who had known the truth all along. There were tears, hugs, and whispered words of "finally, and you did it." Catherine allowed herself a brief, shaky smile, gripping Matteo's arm for support. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving a cold, terrifying dread in its wake. The calm was shattered by Damien's arrival. He stormed through the curtain like a bull, his face a thunderous mask of purple rage. His eyes, burning with a fury Catherine had only seen a few times before, were locked on her. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, his voice dangerously low, ignoring the stunned staff who quickly scattered. "You and him," he spat, gesturing dismissively at Matteo. "You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone? Are you insane?" "This wasn't about humiliating you, Damien," Catherine said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her heart was pounding against her ribs. She placed a protective hand over her stomach. "This was about telling the truth." "The truth?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The truth is that Aura is nothing without me. I built this company. I paid for every scrap of fabric, every needle, every overpriced intern. You're a hobbyist," I indulged. "Damien, stop!" Matteo intervened, stepping between them. "Don't do this here." "You..." Damien turned his venom on Matteo, jabbing a finger in his chest. "You're finished. You'll never work in this city again. I'll destroy you. I'll sue you for breach of contract, for defamation, for what?" Catherine's voice cut through his tirade, sharp as glass. "For telling the world I designed the collection. Go ahead. Sue him. Let's get into discovery. Let's show the court my thousands of sketches, my design journals, my sourcing notes from the past 5 years. Let's compare them to your contribution, a checkbook and a few press conferences." Damien was momentarily stunned into silence. He stared at her, truly seeing the woman in front of him for the first time in years. This wasn't the pliant, conflict-averse girl he had married. Pregnancy had forged a spine of steel within her. Before he could retort, another figure stumbled through the curtain. It was Celine, her face blotchy with tears, her mascara running. "Damien," she sobbed, grabbing his arm. "People are laughing. They're all looking at me. That blogger, Tina Peterson, she just posted a picture of my face with the caption, 'The other woman wore Aura.' We have to leave." Damien looked from the weeping, pathetic figure of his mistress to the calm, resolute face of his pregnant wife. He saw his perfect evening, his perfect image, shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The humiliation was a physical thing, clawing at his throat. Without another word, he wrenched his arm from Celine's grasp, turned on his heel, and stormed out through a back exit, leaving her standing there, utterly abandoned. Celine stared after him for a second, before letting out a gut-wrenching sob and fleeing in the opposite direction. Catherine watched him go, a profound sadness washing over her. This was the true end. Not just of their marriage, but of the illusion she had clung to for far too long. "Are you all right?" Matteo asked gently, his eyes full of concern. "I will be," she whispered. "Take me home, Matteo. Just not to the penthouse." The drive to Matteo's modest West Village apartment was silent. The city lights blurred past the windows, each one a potential camera flash. By the time they arrived, Catherine's phone was a non-stop barrage of notifications. News alerts, texts from friends, family, and dozens of unknown numbers. The story was already the lead item on every major news outlet and gossip site. Billionaire bombshell Damien Sterling's pregnant wife, Catherine revealed as secret genius behind Aura. Fashion Week's ultimate betrayal, a tale of 2 women. Celine Rossi's front row humiliation. Inside Matteo's apartment, which smelled of charcoal and coffee, Catherine finally sank onto a sofa, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. "I should have told you I was going to do that," Matteo said, handing her a glass of water. When he showed up with her looking so smug, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't let him stand there and take credit for your soul one more time. "You did the right thing, Matteo," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You did what I was too afraid to do for myself. Thank you." Meanwhile, Damien arrived back at the Park Avenue penthouse. The vast, cold space, usually a symbol of his success, now felt like a mausoleum. The silence was deafening. He poured himself a large glass of Macallan 25, the amber liquid doing nothing to quell the fire in his gut. He paced the length of the living room, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a city that was at this very moment feasting on his downfall. His mind raced, cycling through rage, panic, and a deep, unfamiliar sense of dread. She had planned this. Her and Matteo. They had conspired behind his back to orchestrate his public execution. The betrayal was absolute. He thought of her quiet compliance over the years, her willingness to stay in the background. He had mistaken it for weakness, for contentment. He saw now that it was just a long, slow gathering of strength. An hour later, the elevator chimed and Catherine walked in. Her face was pale but determined. She didn't come with a suitcase. She hadn't come to pack. She had come for the confrontation. "You have some nerve coming back here," he snarled, turning from the window to face her. "This is my home, Damien," she said calmly, her hand once again resting on her belly. "For now. Our home. Our marriage. You blew that up tonight for a round of applause. Was it worth it? Cat, was your 5 minutes of fame worth everything? Everything. What is everything? Damien. This apartment, the cars, the invitations to parties where you parade me around like an accessory. You keep in storage most of the year." Her voice rose, filled with years of suppressed pain. "That wasn't everything. That was your cage. Everything was the dream we had in my tiny apartment, the one you stole and put your name on. I made you," he roared, slamming his glass down on the marble table. "Without my money and my name, your sketches would still be rotting in a portfolio in some dusty closet. And without my designs, your money would have just bought you another boring tech company." She shot back. "You can't create, Damien. You can only acquire. You can only consume. You tried to consume me, my talent, our life together. And I let you. That's my mistake. But I am not going to let you consume this child." The mention of the baby hung in the air between them, a fragile, unspoken truth. He looked at her, at the swell of her stomach, which held his son or daughter, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear entered his eyes. It wasn't just his company or his reputation at stake anymore. "What do you want, Catherine?" he asked, his voice suddenly weary. "A divorce, money. You want the company?" He laughed humorlessly. "The lawyers will have a field day with this. The paperwork is ironclad. I own 95% of Aura. You own nothing." "We'll see about that," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, a promise and a threat all in one. "You think this is about paperwork. This is about a story. And tonight I finally started telling my side of it." She turned and walked back towards the elevator, her steps measured and sure. She didn't look back. The doors slid shut, leaving Damien Sterling alone in his palatial prison. The silence of the penthouse, a stark testament to the magnitude of what he had just lost. The shattering was complete. Now the war was about to begin. The week following the Aura show was a media apocalypse for Damien Sterling. He became a prisoner in his own home, the street below permanently camped out with paparazzi. Every attempt by his high-priced PR firm, led by the ruthless Olivia Vance, to spin the narrative failed spectacularly. Their initial strategy was to paint Catherine as an unstable, hormonal pregnant woman, manipulated by a jealous employee, Matteo. This backfired immediately. The public, especially women, rallied behind Catherine. She was the wronged wife, the hidden genius, the expectant mother. She was David to his Goliath. The #team. Catherine trended worldwide for 48 hours. Vogue published a powerful op-ed titled "The Invisible Woman No More," celebrating Catherine's courage and condemning the pervasive nature of men taking credit for women's work. Selene Rossi, meanwhile, had gone into hiding. Her social media was a toxic wasteland of mockery and vitriol. Her brand deals were being cancelled one by one. She had gambled on being the queen and had ended up the court jester, a cautionary tale for aspiring influencers everywhere. Catherine, on the other hand, played her hand with masterful precision. She remained completely silent. She gave no interviews, made no public statements. She holed up in a luxury hotel suite, paid for by Matteo, who had become her de facto chief of staff. Her silence was her greatest weapon. It allowed the public narrative to be shaped for her, casting her as a figure of quiet dignity and strength. Her first move was to hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Meredith Shaw, a legendary silver-haired divorce and corporate attorney, known affectionately in legal circles as the Shark in Chanel. Meredith had handled the divorces of rock stars, hedge fund titans, and royalty. She specialized in cases where power dynamics were skewed and hidden assets were at play. Their first meeting took place in Catherine's hotel suite. Meredith, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, listened intently as Catherine, aided by Matteo, laid out the entire history of Aura. She presented box after box of evidence-dated sketchbooks, going back 6 years. Fabric swatches with handwritten notes, time-stamped emails to suppliers detailing specific design instructions, early business plans written in her own hand. It's a mountain of creative attribution. Catherine finished, her voice tired but firm. But he'll say it was work for hire. He'll say the corporation owns everything. Meredith Shaw leaned back, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on her leather-bound notepad. He will. Damien's lawyers at Sterling Industries are corporate sharks focused on contracts and shareholder agreements. They'll argue that since he financed the company and holds the majority shares, all intellectual property generated under its umbrella belongs to the corporation, which he effectively controls. So he was right. I have nothing, Catherine asked, her heart sinking. Absolutely not, Meredith said with a sharp, reassuring smile. They will fight on the grounds of corporate law. We will fight on the grounds of marital law, partnership law, and fraud. You weren't just an employee, Mrs. Sterling. You were his partner in life when this venture was conceived. Aura wasn't just another asset acquired during the marriage. It was the marriage in a commercial sense. We will argue that he fraudulently induced you into relinquishing your founder's stake and credit under the guise of marital trust. Meredith's eyes gleamed. He wanted to tell a clean story for the brand. Fine. We'll tell a messy one to a judge. We'll subpoena everything. Every email, every text message. Especially the ones between him and Miss Rossi. We'll depose every employee who knew you were the creative force. We will make his life so transparently miserable that giving you exactly what you want will seem like a pleasant alternative. While Catherine was building her army, Damien was fighting a multi-front war. His board of directors at Sterling Industries, his primary tech company, was nervous. Their stock had taken a small but noticeable dip. The scandal wasn't just about a marital spat. It raised questions about Damien's character, his judgment and his honesty, qualities crucial for a CEO of a publicly traded company. He sat in a sterile boardroom with his legal team. The mood was grim. Their opening salvo is a request for a 50% stake in Aura full creative control, sole ownership of the brand's intellectual property, the Park Avenue penthouse, and a restraining order against you for emotional distress. His lead lawyer, a man named Robert Phillips, droned on. 50%. She's insane. Damien scoffed. Offer her $10 million, a clean break. Generous given the circumstances. We did, Robert said, adjusting his tie. Meredith Shaw laughed and hung up. Then fight it. Damien slammed his fist on the table. Bury her in paperwork. Bleed her dry. Damien, Olivia Vance, his PR chief, interjected coolly. We need to think about the optics. Every day this drags on your personal brand, which is inextricably linked to Sterling Industries erodes. The narrative is out of our control. Catherine is a pregnant saint, and you're the cheating, credit-stealing monster. A long, nasty court battle will only cement that. So what do you suggest I do? Olivia, roll over and give my wife the company I built. No, she said. You change the narrative. You need to look like the reasonable one, the magnanimous one. We need to find some leverage, some dirt on Catherine, on Matteo Ricci, anything to muddy the waters and force her to the negotiating table. The order was given. Damien deployed private investigators. They were tasked with digging into Catherine's life, past and present. They were to find anything an old boyfriend, a financial misstep, a disgruntled classmate. Simultaneously, they were to dig into Matteo Ricci, his life, his finances, his relationships. Damien was convinced there was something more between him and Catherine. An affair. That would be the perfect weapon. A story of two lovers conspiring to steal a company. It would reframe the entire event. The battle lines were drawn. It was no longer a simple matter of right and wrong, of truth and lies. It had devolved into a brutal war of attrition, fought by lawyers, PR firms, and private investigators. Catherine had the court of public opinion, her creative proof, and the moral high ground. Damien had immense wealth, a fortress of corporate lawyers, and a desperate, ruthless desire to win at any cost. The shattering was over, and the slow, grinding siege had begun. The discovery process was as brutal as Meredith Shaw had promised. Damien's life was put under a microscope. His lavish spending, his trips with Celine, his private communications, everything was subject to subpoena. The Sterling Industries board grew increasingly agitated as the scandal bled into their quarterly reports, with analysts citing CEO reputational risk. Damien, however, was focused on his own offensive. His private investigators, a team from a discreet agency called Crawl, were digging deep. They found nothing on Catherine. Her life was, as one investigator reported back, infuriatingly clean. Her only vice seemed to be expensive Belgian chocolate. Matteo Ricci, however, was a different story. The investigators uncovered a detail from his past that made Damien's eyes light up with malicious glee. Matteo had grown up in the same small town in upstate New York as Catherine. They had known each other since childhood. In fact, their families were close, and Matteo's first sewing lessons had come from Catherine's grandmother, a retired seamstress. He had followed Catherine to New York, and she had helped him get into Parsons. This wasn't just a mentor-mentee relationship. It was a deep, lifelong bond. To Damien, this was gold. He could paint a picture of a long con of two childhood friends plotting for years to usurp him. His PR team, led by Olivia Vance, immediately began leaking this information to friendly gossip columnists. Sterling scandal deepens wife's loyal designer, revealed as childhood confidant. A conspiracy of two insiders. Question if the aura takedown was years in the making. The narrative began to subtly shift. It introduced a seed of doubt. Was Catherine truly a victim, or was she a cunning manipulator? Catherine felt the sting of this new attack. It was a vile twisting of her oldest friendship. Matteo was furious, feeling responsible for giving Damien ammunition. "This is what he does," Catherine told him, her voice weary but resolute. "He can't win on the facts, so he attacks our character. We just have to stay the course." But Meredith Shaw had an ace up her sleeve. Her forensic accounting team had been meticulously combing through Ayura's finances, and they had found the smoking gun. It was bigger than just paying for Celine's flights and hotel rooms with the company card. "He's been embezzling," Meredith stated plainly in their next strategy meeting. She laid out a series of spreadsheets on the table. Not in a clumsy way, but in a very clever one. He set up a shell corporation, a consulting firm called DS Ventures, registered in Delaware. Over the past 2 years, Aura has paid DS Ventures over $15 million in strategic consulting fees. "Consulting for what?" Matteo asked. "For nothing," Meredith replied with a grim smile. "It's a ghost company. The only employee is Damien Sterling. He's been systematically siphoning profits from Aura Your Profits, Catherine, and funneling them into a private account. He used that money to fund his affair, to make risky personal investments in crypto that went bust, and to pay the down payment on a yacht he registered in the Cayman Islands." Catherine stared at the documents, her blood running cold. It wasn't just that he had cheated on her and stolen her credit. He had been actively robbing the company they had built together. He was gutting it from the inside out. "This is no longer just a divorce case," Meredith said, her voice steely. "This is felony-level financial fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement. We can go to the district attorney with this. He could face prison time." The thought of Damien in prison was jarring. Damien the Titan, the master of the universe, reduced to a man in a jumpsuit. A part of her, the part that still remembered the man she had loved, recoiled at the idea. But the part of her that was a mother, a creator and a betrayed partner, knew this was the leverage she needed to end it all. Meanwhile, a second, more insidious layer of sabotage was being uncovered by Matteo. While preparing for the legal battle, he had been reviewing the past year's design archives and server logs. He noticed a pattern. Several of Catherine's most innovative designs had been flagged in the system as problematic or commercially unviable a few months before they were due to be sampled. These flags were always accompanied by a note from Damien's executive assistant, supposedly summarizing Damien's feedback. But Matteo also found something else, a series of design files uploaded from an external IP address. They were clumsy, amateurish sketches, gaudy, overly sexualized versions of Aura's aesthetic. They were all uploaded shortly after Catherine's designs were flagged. The IP address was traced to a downtown luxury apartment building. Matteo did some digging. The apartment was being rented by Selina Rossi. He pieced it together. Selina hadn't just been a passive mistress. She was an active saboteur. She had been trying to get her own design ideas in front of Damien, likely positioning herself to become the new creative force behind the brand once Catherine was fully sidelined. She had been whispering in Damien's ear, convincing him that Catherine's ideas were stale, while simultaneously trying to inject her own tacky vision into the company. The problematic flags on Catherine's designs weren't from Damien. They were likely lies fed to him by Celine, which his assistant then formalized. "She wasn't just sleeping with him," Matteo told Catherine, showing her the evidence. "She was trying to erase you." This revelation hardened Catherine's resolve. The war was not just against Damien's greed, but against a concerted effort to annihilate her creative identity. The image of the weeping, humiliated model at the fashion show was replaced by the image of a cunning, ambitious rival who had tried to steal her life's work. Meredith Shaw was delighted. This is perfect. It dismantles their conspiring lovers narrative. We can show a clear pattern of a third party actively working to undermine Catherine's position in the company with Damien's implicit, if not explicit, consent. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Catherine now held all the cards, the creative proof, the public's support evidence of large-scale financial fraud, and a documented plot of sabotage by her husband's mistress. Meredith Shaw arranged a four-way settlement meeting. Catherine and Meredith on one side, Damien and his lawyer Robert Phillips on the other. It was to be held in a neutral location, a sterile conference room in a midtown law office. Damien walked in, looking haggard but defiant. He still believed his attack on Mateo's and Catherine's childhood friendship gave him an edge. He was about to find out that while he had been throwing pebbles, Catherine had been building a cannon. The conference room on the 48th floor of a midtown skyscraper was a purgatory of beige carpets and sterile chrome. It was chosen for its absolute neutrality, a space devoid of personality or warmth, designed for the sole purpose of dissecting lives and brokering endings. The only view was of a grey, indifferent sky, the silence in the room broken only by the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. It was here that the war for Aurora would come to its bloodless, brutal conclusion. Catherine Sterling sat with a posture of impossible calm, a marble statue amidst the turmoil. Beside her, Meredith Shaw was a portrait of relaxed lethality, her files arranged before her with surgical precision. Across the vast, polished expanse of the mahogany table, Damien was a coiled spring of tension. He had attempted to project an image of command wearing one of his most expensive suits, but the fabric couldn't conceal the tremor in his hand as he adjusted his tie for the 10th time. His lawyer, Robert Phillips, a man whose career was built on bluster and intimidation, shuffled his papers with an air of practiced impatience, ready to strike what he believed would be the final blow. He initiated the proceedings, his voice resonating with false magnanimity. "We are all here today to bring a swift and amicable end to what has been a deeply unfortunate and public episode. My client, Mr. Sterling, bears no ill will. In fact, he feels a great deal of sympathy for Mrs. Sterling's current, delicate condition and the emotional distress she must be under. It is in this spirit of generosity that he is prepared to make a final, conclusive offer." He let the words hang in the air, a performance for an audience of two who were not buying tickets. "Mr. Sterling will offer a one-time payment of $20 million. This is a substantial life-altering sum. In return, Mrs. Sterling will relinquish any and all future claims to Aura, its subsidiaries, and all related intellectual property. She will, of course, be required to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, ensuring the privacy of both parties moving forward. We feel this is more than fair. It is a golden parachute into a very comfortable new life." Damien watched Catherine for a reaction, expecting a flicker of interest, of greed. He had always believed that at her core she was like everyone else, that a sufficiently large number could solve any problem. He saw nothing. Her gaze was fixed on him, but it was distant, analytical, as if she were studying an interesting but dangerous insect. Meredith Shaw offered a thin, wintry smile. She gently pushed the settlement offer back to the center of the table, with the tip of her pen a gesture of polite dismissal that was more insulting than any outburst. "Mr. Phillips," she began, her tone deceptively gentle. My client has not come here today to be pensioned off. She has come to reclaim what was stolen from her. Your client seems to be under the impression that he is the victim of a shakedown. Allow me to correct that misconception. Let us for a moment move away from fiction and discuss reality. Shall we? With a theatrical slowness, Meredith placed a heavy leather-bound binder on the table. The metallic snap of the rings echoed in the silent room. Reality, gentlemen, is Exhibit A. She turned the binder around. It was open to a page from one of Catherine's earliest sketchbooks. The design was for a flowing, asymmetrical dress that had been one of Aura's first bestsellers. This binder, and the 4 others like it beside me, contain the complete, annotated and dated creative genesis of Aura. Not just the inspiration, but the technical specifications. The fabric notes the soul of the company. We have sworn testimony from over a dozen employees, from seamstresses to pattern cutters, who will confirm under oath that Catherine was the sole creative authority from day one. Damien scoffed, though a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Sketches. She was an employee. It was work for hire. Meredith simply moved to the next binder. Exhibit B. She didn't open this one, merely tapped its cover. This contains a forensic analysis of your company's servers and a deposition from your former executive assistant. It details a systematic campaign of sabotage waged against my client not by a business rival, but by your mistress, Ms. Celine Rossi. It shows her repeated attempts to have Catherine's designs discredited while trying to insert her own. A rather fascinating plot. While your PR team was busy leaking stories about a supposed conspiracy between my client and Mr. Ricci, the real conspiracy was happening under your roof, between you and the woman you were sleeping with. It won't play well. Robert Phillips' face began to lose its confident sheen. He shot a sideways glance at Damien, whose knuckles were now white where he gripped the edge of the table. His strategy of painting Catherine as a manipulator was not just neutralized. It was being turned back on him as proof of his own gross negligence and moral bankruptcy. And that brings us, Meredith said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush, to the heart of the matter, the part that has very little to do with fashion or sketches or marital indiscretion. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single, slender file folder. It looked insignificant compared to the heavy binders, but she handled it as if it contained plutonium. She slid it across the table. It stopped directly in front of Damien. Let's call this Exhibit C. I suggest you open it. With a sense of rising dread, Damien flipped open the folder. His breath caught in his throat. Inside were not sketches or emails, but cold, hard bank statements. They showed meticulously documented transfers from Ayura's primary accounts to a shell corporation, DS Ventures LLC, that he recognized with a jolt of pure terror. They showed the subsequent outflow of that money to a Cayman Islands bank to finance a yacht named the Wanderer, to a crypto wallet to cover devastating personal trading losses to a high-end jeweler for a diamond necklace he had given Celine for her birthday. It was all there. A perfect, undeniable criminal roadmap. $15,342,000, Meredith stated, her voice like ice. That's the total you siphoned from the company your wife built. The legal terms are wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance. The consequences— She paused, letting the word hang in the air. Are federal. I spoke to a friend at the U.S. Attorney's office this morning, just catching up. He did mention they have a particular interest in cases of executives using their companies as personal piggy banks, especially when those executives run publicly traded firms like Sterling Industries. The room fell utterly silent. The hum of the ventilation system seemed to roar in Damien's ears. He looked at Robert Phillips, who was staring at the documents, his face ashen. The man's bluster was gone, replaced by the naked fear of a lawyer looking at an indefensible case that could very well get his client sent to prison and him sanctioned for ignoring it. This was the checkmate. All his power, all his wealth, all his influence meant nothing in the face of a federal indictment. His public image would be the least of his worries. He would be ruined utterly and completely. He looked across the table, past the lawyers, past the files, and met Catherine's gaze. The cool, analytical look was gone. In its place was a quiet, profound sorrow, but it was enveloped in a core of unbending steel. He was finally truly defeated. "What do you want, Catherine?" he asked, his voice, a ragged whisper, stripped of all its former power. It was the first time he had addressed her directly. It was the question of a man begging for the terms of his surrender. Catherine leaned forward, her voice as soft as his, was broken, yet it filled the room. "I want what is mine, Damien," she said. "I don't want a settlement. I want restitution. I want my company. I want my home. I want my life back." Meredith Shaw took her cue. Her voice now sharp and clinical as she laid out the terms of surrender. "First, you will sign over your entire 95% stake in Aura Holdings to Catherine. She will become the sole owner effective immediately. You will resign from all positions. Second, the Park Avenue penthouse will be transferred to her name. We will consider it a partial, and I must stress partial, repayment of the funds you embezzled. In return for this and this alone, we will refrain from turning Exhibit C over to the authorities. Consider it a gift. Third," Meredith continued, "you will issue a public statement, a full, unequivocal apology, which we have already taken the liberty of drafting. It will name Catherine Sterling as the sole founder and creative visionary of Aura, and confess that you have wrongfully taken credit for her work. Finally, a restraining order will be filed. You will not contact, approach, or communicate with Catherine in any way except through our respective legal offices for matters pertaining strictly to your unborn child. These terms are not negotiable." Damien Sterling, the titan of tech, the self-proclaimed king of fashion, slumped in his chair. He was broken. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was over. The days that followed were a blur of sterile legal proceedings. Damien moved with the dazed, hollowed-out look of a ghost. The public apology he was forced to release was a global sensation, an act of ritual self-immolation that confirmed every rumor and vindicated Catherine completely. His ousting from Sterling Industries was swift and brutal. 3 weeks later, Catherine Sterling walked back into the main Aura workshop. The air, once heavy with unspoken tension, felt clear and bright. Her team greeted her with cheers and tears of joy. Her first act was to tear down the large Aura by Damien Sterling sign that had hung over the main design floor. In its place, she personally hung a new one, Aura by Catherine Sterling. She stood before her team, her hand on the proud swell of her belly. Matteo was beside her, his expression one of pure, unadulterated pride. She was home. She had faced the monster who had consumed her life and had not just defeated him, but had forced him to confess his sins to the entire world. The fall had been his. But the rise, the glorious, brilliant rise, was all hers. In the end, this wasn't just a story about infidelity or a business dispute. It was a story about identity. Damien Sterling built his identity on a lie, and it crumbled under the weight of the truth. Celine Rossi chased an identity that wasn't hers and was left with nothing. But Catherine Sterling, after years of having her identity suppressed, reclaimed it in the most public way imaginable, reminding us all that true power isn't about the credit you take, but the truth you're willing to fight for. Her journey from a silent partner to a celebrated founder is a powerful testament to resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a creator. Thank you for watching. If this story of empowerment and justice resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories that matter. Let us know in the comments. What did you think of Catherine's ultimate move?